Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Deep in the Plus. Each week we go deep into the Disney Plus catalog and take a look at some of the things that you might have missed and tell you if they're worth adding to your watch list. If you're new to the show, please catch our other episodes, like and subscribe to this channel, and you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Deep in the Plus. For this episode, we picked a movie that was just added to Disney Plus on April 1st, and I'm not joking, it's Mars Needs Moms. Mars Needs Moms was released in 2011 and was animated in motion capture by the Robert Zemeckis company Image Movers Digital. In this film, we're introduced to Milo, a 9-year-old boy who has a lot on his mind. He has monster movies to watch, comic books to read, and all kinds of other fun stuff to accomplish. He definitely doesn't have time to do his homework or eat his vegetables, and he's getting tired of his mom nagging him to do those things, just like his mom's tired of nagging. But as Milo is telling his mom that life would be much more fun without her, Martians kidnap her. Milo stows away on their spaceship, determined to launch a rescue. Now I know you're probably feeling a little bit nervous right now, but don't worry. Every person thinking about watching Mars Needs Moms has felt that way at one time or another. Before you decide if it's right for you, come along on a test run as we venture to the Red Planet and take you deep in the plus. Hey guys, so this week I have another very special guest, Patrick Hackett from the WDWNT fam. And Patrick, we were talking about this movie in chat. You raised your hand and said, yes, please God, I need to talk about this one. So are you ready for this? Like, Mars Needs Moms is our movie. What's your feeling? What you got going on?
I don't know if anybody is actually ready for this. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I said I needed to do this one because I needed to see the movie that sank one of my favorites, and I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later on.
So this was an Imagine Movers digital film. There were a couple of these. There was the Jim Carrey Christmas Carol was the first one, and actually the first one with Disney. So Robert Zemeckis had this company, the guy that put together Back to the Future, and he did Polar Express. I thought Polar Express was a little creepy. So then the idea that Disney was getting into this business with them, I was not overly excited about. So then they did A Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey, which we didn't even touch that one at Christmas because we were like, let's watch Muppets instead. So then, this one came along, and it was supposed to be a huge deal for Disney and for Imagine Movers Digital, and I feel like it is probably the butt of every joke when it comes to movies that Disney has put together recently. Yes?
I think, honestly, you're going to see like A Wrinkle in Time take that a little bit. People really came down hard on that because it was so highly promoted. You had Oprah involved, and it was a very popular children's book. It's been the butt of WWNT jokes forever with our Mars Needs Cheetahs
Right.
reference from See You Real Late way back when. Did you stay all the way through the credits?
You mean to watch all the behind the scenes mocap stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was incredible, and you could just see how much money and everybody was trying so hard.
You're like, well, in the South here we say bless your heart. So it's like,
Yeah.
bless your heart. You tried so hard. Sorry you had such a huge movie failure. You know what? This movie, it cost $150 million to make, and it made $38 million at the box office. Honestly, and this is going to be a hot take, and I am ready for you to jump at me on this. I didn't hate this movie, man. I saw it in the theater when it came out. I thought it was okay. I didn't hate it. It wasn't one that I wanted to like rush right out and buy afterwards, which a lot of times with Disney movies, I feel like I need to own it.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't really feel like a Disney movie because it was Imagine Movers Digital. So the same thing with movies like Valiant, or BFG, or thinking also about like Romeo and Juliet, movies where they just kind of put their name on it and they release it,
Yes.
kind of like they did Pixar movies in the beginning.
Yeah.
So it didn't really feel to me like a Disney failure as much as it just felt like a failure for mocap in general.
The uncanny valley is just so hard to defeat sometimes.
Right.
My first impression was I'm watching this. I'm like, oh my God, this movie is beautiful.
Yeah.
Those first few scenes, it's just really great, and it draws you in immediately. And then it just goes completely haywire.
Okay, so tell me where it lost you. Tell me what you open up, you see this beautiful movie. Now, I know you're a Mars fan in general, so like Mars is a
I
topic.
do like space stuff I'm a big fan of, except for Mission Space, but space stuff in general, big fan of. I don't know where it lost me, but it just all of a sudden I was like, I had so many questions that were unanswered. First and foremost, did they go to South Carolina? I saw them zooming in on the map. I'm like, they look like they're going to South Carolina. And then she had a Carolina Panthers jersey on. I'm like, why? Why so specific with the location?
Well, and actually, I live in North Carolina, so
Yeah.
the Panthers are in Charlotte, and so they're on the
Yep.
border between North and South Carolina. I did think it was very interesting. It doesn't have the NFL logo on it; it says
Yeah.
something like SL instead.
Yeah.
But it was very specifically number 21 Smith, and it was the Carolina Panthers colors. But
Yeah.
that is something very unique. Why did it have to be very specific to that area? I don't know. Are they saying something about us in the South? Do they
I don't
need to come at
know.
me? Do I need to fight somebody? Is that what's happening here? But
It felt so much like an Anytown USA story. Like you could have just zoomed that camera into the general area of the Midwest. But I followed that camera zoom, and I'm like, that is the Carolinas. I know my geography, and that's where that is.
yeah, it was the jersey that jumped out to me more than it was where they
Yeah.
zoomed into, though.
Yeah. And then Joan Cusack, fantastic actress.
Sure.
It's Jessie. Jessie is the mom in this movie, and it's hard to separate that as a Disney fan.
She's a rootin'est, tootin'est mom. You know,
That's why Mars needs her.
okay, so let's back up a second. So the mocap is actually Joan Cusack, and it's
Yeah.
actually Seth Green, which is the
Right.
weirdest part to me, is that
Yes.
Seth Green is the lead in this. He is top billing when you look at the credits, and yet it's not his voice, it's just his acting, like his facial acting.
So it's
as you go
not
through.
his voice. I
No.
would have thought they just aged down his voice.
No, there was
we have
another-
the ability to do that.
There was
right?
another guy, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but he is credited as, and I'm looking this up right now, like Seth Dusky. So, and it's way down in the list. It says voice of Milo. So Seth Green is number one, and Joan Cusack's number two. So because I knew ahead of time now, like not when I saw it first time, but rewatching this, that Seth Green was the model for it. I kind of saw a lot of Seth Green in it. I mean, you see the short hair, see some of the reactions that he does. But it didn't bother me because it didn't look overtly Seth Green, but that is overtly Joan Cusack.
Joan Cusack. Yep.
And it's to the point where it's distractingly so. I mean, it's just, it's a little creepy. And, you know, you were talking about it being a beautiful movie. I think when you do mocap, the motions are very fluid and natural, and that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think that the environments were wonderful. But the actual expressions, very off-putting.
It's creepy.
Yeah.
I put in my notes next, that cat is terrifying. That cat looked too real. I didn't like it at all.
The one that eats the broccoli and it's throwing up in the,
This is something I will say about this movie. I didn't like it. We'll get into the details why. But man, did it get some really great belly laughs out of me.
Oh, really?
Like, really genuine laughs. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The whole broccoli ordeal with, that's poison? Well, no, it's not poison to you. It's poison to the cat. Why isn't it poison to me? I thought that was really funny.
Well, you have a baby, so you haven't been through those child years. I've been through those years where they kind of push back a little bit, and there were some times where I just kind of wanted to like take Milo and shake him, just because it was way too accurate a depiction of a kid who was just kind of like pushing back on mom, and you look at poor mom and the things she's just sitting there and trying her best because dad's off doing whatever.
They pay for a huge voice for the dad, and he gets, 6 lines?
Right.
Tom Everett Scott comes and does the dad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he doesn't come into play ever again?
Well, and you're right. That was very strange, and it makes you wonder if there were more outtakes about the dad. There are some special features on Disney Plus, and if you go and look at it, you can see some like deleted scenes. I didn't see any that I noticed of the dad, but there were a couple of deleted scenes. And again, the disturbing part about the deleted scenes is that they're unfinished, and the mocap faces are even more real, like they're just etched into like almost like a dummy of an animation, and so it's just Seth Green's face right there talking to Joan Cusack's face. Very creepy.
It's like some of the new level audio animatronics with the projection mapping faces.
Yeah,
it's a lot like that.
If they were done super poorly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing, like I watched this with my wife. One of the things that really bothered her were the things that were stereotypical of when Milo's on Mars. He gets dumped out into onto the planet, and he's trying to communicate with these characters that or the Martians, where he is trying to tell them about his mom, and he's trying to show what mom does. And he says, "Mom,
yeah.
she cleans the wash, she vacuums the floor," and my wife's like. Like, you know, are we back in the 50s? What's really, like, I mean, is that all that defines mom here? You know, and so to me, there were some nice things he said about her, but I think a lot of the main story of this is about the relationship of, you know, and it's a theme you see in a ton of other movies. You don't know how good you got it until you've lost it. And he had this mom, and he didn't realize how good things were with her until someone took her away. And now he wishes he had been nicer. He wishes he had behaved. And wishes he'd appreciate her more.
I think it's like a lot of Disney stories in that way. It's about growing up when you experience loss. You know, that's very much a classic Disney trope. And you see Milo grow up and you see him begin to appreciate and understand. But you're right, man. They hit so hard with some of those mom stereotypes that it was just uncomfortable. You know, looking at this with a 2020 scope, it's not a good look.
Yeah, and you know, here's a question that I ask myself a lot of times is, who was this movie really for?
That's such a great question.
Because
such a great question.
It's not really for little kids. I mean, it's got a PG rating on it for what they call sci-fi, action, and peril. And the fact that mom's life is in danger, and this
Super danger.
Yeah, and the kid is like the kid is by himself on this planet trying to fend for himself. That's intense, right?
Yeah, it is dark. It is dark at times. When you get the backstory of Gribble, that's super upsetting.
Right. Yeah. So then who do you think this movie was for? Like, who's the target?
I don't know. You know, we were talking about how this movie came to be, and to me, it really felt like a DreamWorks movie. And I look back, and a lot of people who worked on this worked on DreamWorks projects.
Oh, okay.
And especially at the end, you see with the like post-credit sting with the baby peeing. I'm like, that is absolutely a DreamWorks gag. That is not a Disney gag.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is it like a tween movie?
You know, maybe, but again, was it cool enough to be a tween movie? I don't know, because
I think that's what they were aiming for.
Yeah, Kevin Rafferty in the Imagineering story on Disney Plus talked about how to pitch an attraction idea at Imagineering, they have to be able to summarize it in one sentence. And I thought to myself, could you really summarize this in clearly what this movie is about in one sentence? Yeah, it's a little tough. And I think that some of the movies they've had failures with, I think, are ones where they couldn't possibly communicate what it was to the audience. I think John Carter of Mars was that way. Mm-hmm. I think that Prince of Persia was that way. I think that BFG, Tomorrowland.
Yes.
I think these were movies that didn't really know their audience and really who they were pitching to, and they couldn't clearly define what they were. I don't think they were all bad movies. I just think they couldn't really define what they were and who they were made for.
Well, there's so many of those kind of movies, and especially with Disney Plus, on a show like this, you're going to find tons of those films that people enjoy. People will say they're their favorites, but have no direction and therefore no profitability. So, you know, good movies get lost in there sometimes.
So Gribble is the character who has been on Mars already. He's trying to help Milo through all this. What did you think about his 80s references?
First and foremost, I wrote in my notes, as soon as he came on, Dan Fogler is perfect choice for Gribble. That's who that kind of embodies. You watch him on the Goldbergs. That's very similar. Some of the other movies he's done. I had a hard time, believe it or not, figuring out if he was on the up and up. My wife made fun of me because she figured it out immediately that he was a kid who was abandoned up there. Same situation as Milo. I was like, oh, maybe he was like a Reagan era Secronaut. I was just, I kind of thought that would be fun, but it became abundantly clear that he was, stuck in a childlike state.
Yeah, and he's just like a fun actor. I definitely think that he really embodied this character. But like I'm listening and as it's going through, and he's talking about 80s stuff like Rubik's Cubes and Moonwalk and Reagan, and to the point where it's like, okay, we get it. he's you don't have to push it so far in our faces that he's a child of the 80s, but there were a lot of references through it, and I thought just a little bit too much, like that were almost offensive. Like, okay, fine, I understand he was from the 80s, but you're right when you talked about earlier that his story is just it's heart-wrenching, like what happened to him.
Yeah, the drama got just leapt up several levels, and I wrote at the end, this movie didn't earn that ending. And that's something I think about. I took film writing class when I was in college, and I've taken film as art and all that stuff. And really studying film is, you gotta earn it. You can't come out here with this really earnest and heartfelt thing after putting all that stuff before it.
I'm still not clear on that. How do you mean that it didn't earn it?
I think it went for a much more dramatic finish than I think it deserved. I felt like we were playing this as a comedy, although we just said that there was so much drama. I mean, this is a life or death movie. These are high stakes.
Right.
You've set the stakes high, and it just felt like the whole, there's where the mask where I left for my mom, and multiple saving, and then the intergalactic romance at the end.
Right. With Key, that was a little bit,
yeah. I had to stop myself because I'm like, these aliens look very familiar. I'm like, oh, this is the one with Rihanna, and this is not the movie with Rihanna.
Well, you know what?
That was Home.
Oh, right. Home with Jim Parsons. Okay. Yeah. It had a very almost. I felt a very Avatar vibe at some points.
Yes. Yeah,
where like Jake
much.
Sully wants to stay and be a part of the culture and help change it and grow it, and so there was a little bit of that vibe with their romance, and it was more than a little strange. I have a question for you that you may not know the answer to from a as a Mars expert. So you can put your Mars expert hat on this one. In John Carter of Mars, you looking for a hat?
Yeah, I was looking for a hat.
Okay.
Definitely.
So in John Carter of Mars, there is a lot of scenes with him talking in what we believe to be Martian, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this movie, I'm wondering, they talk a lot in Martian too. Do you think that they used a similar dialect like we see like Wookiee and Na'vi and all these other languages, or did they just make up some gobbledygook for this one and some gobbledygook for John Carter of Mars?
So I think the John Carter of Mars obviously comes from Edgar Rice Burroughs' original writings. This one, it was weird because if you watch the mocap making of stuff that roll with the credits, you see the woman, and I'm very sorry, I can't
Mindy
remember
Sterling.
her name. Yep. And she's speaking these words, and she is very clearly enunciating them and putting the emphasis on them. So, they have these people in Hollywood that write languages, and I wouldn't be surprised for a movie with this kind of budget if they went with that, made up their own Martian language.
So let's talk about Mindy Sterling's character was called the Supervisor. I feel like she could have been, had this movie had success, one of Disney's bigger villains.
Yeah.
I mean, she was scary.
Definitely a villain. Yes.
So
that struck me. Like, I kept writing in my notes. I was like, this is dark. This is very, very dark. And it was serious. One of the problems that we deal with Disney Plus that we don't get with a movie theater experience is you have your phones. We're all very hard pressed to not look at our phones all the time, but you start IMDbing,
right.
And as soon as I've seen what else she's been in, I'm like, oh my God, that's Frau Blucher from Austin Powers.
Right.
And that's all I heard from that point forward.
Which also had Scott was played by Seth Green. Maybe they had worked together before in that movie.
Seth Green was a big part in getting this made, if I remember correctly. This was like when they were doing a lot of the promotion. I remember Seth Green being front and center.
So this was based on a book by Berkeley Brethard, and I may be saying his name wrong, but from Bloom County and Opus. He was the one who wrote the book Mars Needs Moms that this was based on, and I thought it was original. I didn't think it was based on anything.
Yeah, I had no idea this was, and that's a very talented writer. And even the writer who wrote and directed this, I mean, he did Fievel.
Okay, so again, this has all the pieces of a successful movie, right?
Yeah.
So I go back again to why did this fail? And here's the thing too is I don't think that it's the horrible, horrible movie, and we can talk about this when we get closer to the end, that everyone says it is, or assumes it is. And as a matter of fact, I was trying to get a quorum in my house, which we're all stuck here anyway, to watch this movie, and two of the four of us passed on it. Like, no, I'm not watching that again. And they saw it, and my wife was like, you know what? I saw it and I didn't like it, but I don't remember why. And we watched it again. She's like, you know what? I don't remember why I didn't like it before. She's like, and same as me. Like, it's not awesome, it's not great, but it's not as bad as people say. At least I don't think so, but I think you do.
It's a bad movie. It's structurally a bad film. It is not, for lack of trying. There's films, and you can talk about everybody who goes and watches The Room and they love bad movies. People have made so huge careers making bad movies. This isn't like an intentionally bad movie. This is a movie that went completely wrong somewhere, and I don't know if it's in the tone, if it's in the unevenness of the story, but it's not for lack of trying, because everybody in here gives good performances. I get good laughs. The score is killer. Mm-hmm. There were positives for it. I think it's just the storytelling, and when you look, I said that the writer is the person who wrote Fievel, but there's also 3 other people credited as writers. And I think this movie, as well as, John Carter of Mars, which is very tied to it, is in a time when Walt Disney Pictures was not doing a good job. And there was a lot of issues going on back and forth in the corporation between, what films are getting made, how they're going to be promoted. I think that's where the disconnect is that you had too many chefs in the kitchen. There's too many people trying to figure out what this movie is, just like we are now.
Right. So I'm, again, looking at what, like, missed opportunities is what I'm thinking here. So, like, the watch that Milo was wearing, I could have seen, had this movie been a success, people making those watches and selling those watches. The little spider robot, I think that would have been a great remote control.
So adorable.
Yeah, that would have been a great remote control thing. The headsets that they were wearing, I think would be cool. It would have been cool, kind of walkie-talkie thing.
Could have done a laser tag game with it.
Yeah, and then I think they could have been stuffed Martians, the little teeny tiny the younglings. I think that would have been a cool thing. And then also it occurs to me there could have been a sequel with what happened to Gribble when he went back. So I think there were a lot of things that could have happened, but it's just, again, this is one that there's never going to be I can't say never, but there's never going to be a reboot. There's never going to be, like, this isn't even like a Tron where it has this, like, grassroots, like cult classic feel to it. It's just one of those that's just a pariah, it feels like. And on top of that, and we had to wait for this. We had to wait to review this because someone else owned the rights to stream it, and it wasn't available when Disney Plus launched. So somebody somewhere saw some value. I think it was Starz in holding on to this movie for a while, and so it just dropped on Disney Plus April 1st for us to review it. So it's something missed. And again, you seem to have a much more clear picture of why you didn't like it, though.
I think the thing that's missed is this isn't a fish out of water buddy adventure. You lean into the friendship a little more between the younger kid stuck on Mars and the older guy stuck on Mars. You get to that reveal a little bit quicker, and maybe you put a little drama in there. Maybe you show, what happened to Gribble's mom, and he doesn't want that to happen to Milo's mom. I think that you play this like PG Bad Boys kind of deal. I think it goes over a little bit better, but it was trying to hit so many different notes, and I think it missed. And what really hit me was with comedy. I love slapstick comedy, even in animation. It is just, anytime somebody was falling or getting hurt, I loved it. I thought the kid actor, which I thought was Seth Green, and Dan Fogler had good chemistry. Mm-hmm. It was entertaining at times, but when you're aiming in so many different directions, it's hard to hit a home run in every direction. It's hard to get a single in every direction. That's why I think, summing it all up, it might be a lack of focus somewhere in this. Maybe a different cut.
Which is weird because it takes place in such a small span of time. And so it's like it takes place almost within, I would assume, like a day because of the timing of when he gets
Hmm.
there and how much time he has on the clock before he has to save his mom. So it's not like they had a lot to tell. They had some characters they needed to
Hmm.
introduce you to. They introduced you to what the issue was and what the resolution was going to be and what the mission was. And there were a lot of unexplained things, like the whole
Yep.
valley underneath the like in the inside of the planet.
Yeah.
Like there were ruins there. It didn't really say why they didn't live there anymore.
Why their babies pop out of the ground.
Right. So I mean, there were some things that were unexplained, but yet it was a fairly long movie, and at the same for a kids movie for an animated
Okay, I was
film.
gonna say because it was just a little over 90 minutes, right?
Right. Which is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's that. I mean, like
Yeah,
Pocahontas
88
was,
minutes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Pocahontas was 88 minutes. So it's one of those where I'm just like, they didn't have much to tell, and yet it seems like they missed some things along the
Yeah.
way. So I just, for me, I don't hate this movie,
Hmm.
but I felt like that everyone I've talked to about it, whenever you mention the name of this movie, and as a matter of fact, we did a watch along this morning, and I mentioned to Tom we were doing this one, and Tom Corliss goes, "I've never seen that movie, but I heard it's horrible." So he's never watched it, but he's already
Yeah.
has this like impression of it that it's an awful movie.
So I like to go into things like this with an open mind because I went into John Carter and I was like, this is going to be the dud everybody says it is, and I turned out I love that film.
Yeah.
I went in with an open mind, and when it first starts rolling, I'm like, yeah, I can get behind this. And then you see the humans, and the uncanny valley sets in, and then the cat looks weird, and it's hard to get past that. But they pull me back here and there. The jokes get me. I kept expecting Wall-E to come out because of all the trash everywhere. It's like, oh, is this a tie into Wall-E somehow?
Yeah.
I don't think it's as terrible as people say, but I wouldn't. It's bad. It's lost in translation somewhere.
Right.
And that's what I was thinking. Speaking of translation, I knew we were going to have to get to the gimmick. Sorry, professional wrestling term. Whatever something is that you can't describe, it's a gimmick. That translates. But why didn't we have subtitles at the beginning of the movie?
Well, that's why I was asking you if this was like a
Yeah.
normal type of like Martian, like everyone uses this language, because I felt like that's the same thing. Like there were some
Yeah.
times in this where they just never explain what's happening, and you sort of have to pick it up from like context clues.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, usually you do see subtitles and things like that. I don't know why. One of the things I thought was interesting is a lot of times in these movies, especially with Pixar movies, there are Easter eggs you look for.
Yeah.
And I didn't,
Always.
I mean, I've only seen this now twice,
Mhm.
once in the theater years ago when it came out, and then just this week. So I didn't really kind of read up or look for any. But the one thing I did notice is that when Milo left his room, there was an Incredibles poster on the wall. So I mean, I don't know if you saw any other Easter eggs through it or not, or any little things that you noticed.
The one thing my wife pointed out and made her insanely angry is Milo went across the hall to check on his mom and put his sneakers on.
That bothered me too. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie, that bothered me
Yeah.
too, because I thought, you could have had like a John McClane situation where
Yeah.
he's barefoot and it runs into something like on the planet, because he did get the suit on the planet, so he wouldn't have been without shoes. But you're right. Why would he? And they focus on him. They focus on him
Yeah.
as he's putting them on. Why would he need tennis shoes to walk around in his own house? Especially since
Yeah.
most people are the opposite. You don't want shoes in your house. That.
Especially after we saw how much his mom has been cleaning.
That's a
Like,
good
dude,
point.
just keep your sneakers off. I kept looking. I didn't see anything. I was hoping to spot something, anything that would like tie this to the greater Disney universe. It didn't feel Disney to me. And I think if you just put this as like a DreamWorks, or I don't know any other animation companies really anymore. There's like 3 companies in the entire world now. If it was just some other animation company, it wouldn't have got the heat that was attached to it because it's a Disney film and it doesn't meet the quality of a Disney film.
I think that to me, the only thing that really still bothers me about it, because I will forgive a lot of things. So I need the yous of the world to come back and say, hey, no, let me just tell you this sucked. Because I don't think it did. I don't think it was all that horrible. But the Imagine the Imagine Movers digital, the animation that they did, was unsettling to me. It was they were going for lifelike. They did this with Tom Hanks in the Polar Express. I feel like we forgive it a little bit more there because that has a very endearing story. They did it with the Jim Carrey, and it's not an easy process. I mean, you see like Andy Serkis behind the scenes doing mocap, and it's not an easy process. So kind of like stop action animation, I appreciate the art, but I don't really appreciate the outcome of these movies and how it worked. And one of the things that is like infamous for me is that Disney had a plan to do more of these movies. They were going to do Yellow Submarine, and they actually advertised Yellow Submarine at D23 Expo one year. They had a big card about it. They said, it's coming, the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, we're going to redo it with this same mocap, and that never came to be. They were also apparently going to reboot Roger Rabbit using this technology as part of this deal because Robert Zemeckis was involved in the original Roger Rabbit. I think that you mentioned in the beginning, the animation was very well done, and like outside of the mocap. You know, the visuals were stunning. It was way above what we would have seen or critiqued out of the very first Toy Story movie. And yet at the same time, that mocap part of it, to me, just bothers me a little bit.
Especially when you're using a famous actress. Like Joan Cusack has a very noticeable face. She has a very noticeable voice. And again, this is a Disney film. So when you start thinking Disney, I'm like, this is a really weird direction for Toy Story to go.
So, with all that said, Patrick Hackett, would you recommend this movie?
I would not recommend this movie. I would recommend you watch literally anything else on D+ than this movie. I have not found something that I scrolled through the titles all day today. I actually stopped and watched a couple Nat Geo specials. Really fantastic. But I could not find anything that I was like, yeah, no, I would watch everything else before I would watch Mars Needs Moms again.
Oh, wow. You know, I have one that we reviewed earlier that was Return of Jafar. And Return of Jafar was one of those that I think they took something that was really good and they kind of blew it. So I think that for me, that one is, I like this better than that. But I'm not sure that I would, like, I have reasons that I would recommend Return of Jafar if you're a huge Aladdin fan. If you're the kind of person who likes to see the whole series, because Prince of Thieves, the King of Thieves, the last one was a good movie. So I feel like there's reasons to recommend that one. I did not hate this one, but I would find it very difficult for me to recommend this movie for anybody. And I feel like a little bit of a need sometimes to defend things. I'm not sure how much of a defender I would be of this movie. I don't think it's as bad as everybody says, but I'm not going to put myself out there and say that this is a good movie either. So I agree with you. I would not recommend this movie either. And so I hope that we save somebody some time and you bypass this movie, especially now that it's been just added. It's going to be in the top of your Disney Plus queue. So you may want to just miss this one. But if you've watched this, or if you're a huge fan of it for some reason, or if you think we've missed the mark, definitely let us know. Hit us up at Deep in the Plus on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or comment below and let us know what you think and why you love this movie if you do. And if not, just tell us you agree. Definitely you've watched it, you don't want to see it, or you're just going to pass. So, Patrick, thank you for walking through this somewhat of a train wreck with me. I appreciate your time.
Oh man, it was a pleasure. I really enjoy the show. We're doing great work on the network with this program and all of our others, but you need this program in your life, because if you're not watching this, if you're not listening to this, you're wasting your time scrolling through the menus of Disney Plus. And once you watch Mars Needs Moms, you're going to get recommended every other quote unquote bad Disney movie that follows it. So now Treasure Planet, Atlantis, Home on the Range, Chicken Little. I was like, oh, God, I should have never watched this.
All right, man. I appreciate it. All right, Patrick, so you know how this works. Now it's time to give your pick of the week. What you got? What are you liking?
Well, you heard us mention it several times throughout this episode. My pick of the week is John Carter.
Nice.
And you kept referring to it as John Carter of Mars, but after Mars Needs Moms tanked, they decided that the problem with the movie was Mars. So it just became John Carter.
Okay.
My obsession with John Carter started when we had Michael D. Sellers on Serial 8. He wrote the book John Carter and the Gods of Hollywood. Fantastic book. It really explains the whole way that John Carter became perceived as a flop. Honestly, everything you see in Star Wars, in Superman, all that comes from Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter series, which do not try and read because it doesn't really jive with 2020 standards, if you know what I'm saying. It gets a little cringy. But the movie itself is actually a fantastic film. Poor Taylor Kitsch. He had miss after miss, but the dude's a good actor. Lynn Collins as Deja Thoris was just tremendous. And it's a fun adventure. If you take it with a grain of salt and you're going to say, oh my God, this looks like Star Wars, you think, no, this technically came before Star Wars, and it highly influenced George Lucas. So check out John Carter. Don't watch anything else that says of Mars on it.
All right, so my bad. You know what, I feel like when they originally pitched this at D23, they did call it John Carter of Mars. So
yep. And then they changed it
because of Mars Needs Moms.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So I'm going to go a little bit more modern on my pick and pick something that has just recently hit Disney Plus, and it is something called Lamp Life. So it is a short. It is from Toy Story 4, and it's a little bit about what happened with Bo Peep when after she left Molly's bedroom until she meets up with Woody. So this was a piece that was originally designed for Toy Story 4 and then was removed. I would find that one of the interesting things about Toy Story in general is that sometimes Tom Hanks does the voice of Woody, and sometimes he gives it to his brother Jim Hanks, who sounds so much like him. And so what I think is interesting is in most of the shorts and all of the movies, it's always Tom as Woody, but in this one, it's actually Jim. And it's not a lot of Woody in this one. And I think that when they did the scene originally for the movie, Tom was in it. So they had probably some rewrites, had Jim do it. But it's still kind of neat to see this, kind of this missing piece. And I think it would have normally been something that they would have just had on the DVD. But they present it as its own thing along the lines of something like the Spark Shorts or Forky Asks a Question. So you probably saw it fall into your queue.
Yep.
It's like 8 minutes long. It's definitely worth a watch. It's a very cute little short, and I would highly recommend it. So again, thank you guys for watching. Any more comments? We'd love to hear from you. Any suggestions of what we need to be doing next? We'd love those suggestions too. And again, Patrick, thank you so much for doing this with me, buddy.
My pleasure. It is such a fantastic show. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it.
If you like what you're watching, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on social at Deep in the Plus on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're a Disney Parks fan, don't forget to catch me and Rob on Park Center Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on WDWNT.com.